And that really is only scratching the surface, tip of the iceberg, call it what you will, of the training career of Roger Charlton, which has been the training career of Roger and Harry Charlton latterly. And, of course, they teamed up with Group Race Victory with Time Lock a couple of days ago. What a lovely filly she looks. And yesterday, narrowly denied with a heavy favourite Greek Order in the Cambridgeshire. And it is quite extraordinary, welcome, Roger, that we spoke on Friday. I'd spoken to Dan and Claire earlier in the week, and I watched the race, and there they are flashing past the post together. To their delight, I'm sure, and your somewhat frustration. How do you feel about yesterday, first of all?
I could see why he was favourite going into it, because his profile looked good, and his performance at Newbury was impressive. But, you know, it was a small field. He was able to be relaxed at the back. He came wide up straight. He understandably went up 10 pounds. I think Time Form had him rated well clear of the others, or a few pounds clear of the others. So he was an obvious favourite. I thought he was very short in the market, to be honest, for a 33 or 34 runner race. To be 3 to 1 or whatever price was, I thought was much too short, really. But he ran a great race, and, you know, that was, I think, his 7th race. So he's inexperienced compared to a lot of those horses. I think he's going to develop into a really nice horse, and I was pleased yesterday. He actually settled well, which had been a problem before, and he walked round. He looked magnificent in the paddock. He's a proper big son of Kingman.
And your son Harry, I was speaking to on Friday afternoon, and he was saying it was very obvious from when he came in that he was kind of top of the class.
Yeah, I mean, you get to sort of this time of the year with 2-year-olds, and you're always looking for something to arrive. And he always worked like a really good horse. And it's silly to think you may have a Guineas horse at that stage, but he did work really well. And then we went to Newmarket, and we went to Salisbury and got beaten favourite, and then we went to Newmarket, and Charlie Appleby beat us. Oh, well, that's probably a really good horse, and blah, blah, blah. So it was a bit disappointing, really, to be fair. But, that happens a bit. And I think it's coming good now. And I think if he, if he runs again, we'll step him up back to 10 furlongs, which I think is really what the Trippy wants. And I think, ideally, he doesn't want the ground quite as quick as it was yesterday.
Now, I said before the break that you had some important news for us. You were Roger Charlton. You have been Roger and Harry Charlton. Next season it's going to be
Harry Charlton.
So you are, I don't know what are you doing? I was going to say you're retiring, but people hate that.
Well,
so.
I got a message just now from Steve Drown, who, as you know, is a stipe. Sorry to hear, boss, that you're retiring. And so I quickly got back to that. I'm actually not retiring because I like working. What we're doing is that, as you know, we had a joint licence. I discussed it with Harry as to whether a joint licence was the right approach, and we thought it was, that you have a sort of seamless transition and that some of the owners get to know him better. I think it's right now. He's extremely experienced, very able and bright person, and I think it's right for him to hold the licence. I think it's right for Beckhampton Image to have a slightly younger image going forwards, and so we thought the end of this season it was a sensible thing to do. It was just a question of when it was going to actually be announced. I have managed to ring up all the owners already. But, I'm not going anywhere, and I've been there, I think, 45 years, and really doing the same thing, and I've been training for 33 years or something. I'm not going to suddenly not get up in the morning. I like doing it. I like horses. I love going around evening stables every day, and I love going out in the downs, and I like sitting on a tractor and mowing the grass and doing everything that to keep Beckhampton going. I mean, it's an amazing piece of history in that I think it's now 200 years old for training, and I think that Harry will be the 8th trainer in those 200 years. So, we've all had a good stint, and obviously my predecessors have been incredibly famous and very good trainers.
Is that something you always felt, that sense of custodianship?
Yeah.
You felt you were just looking after it for the next person?
Yeah, I think so, because I think life is full of chances, and I happened to be lucky that Jeremy Tree asked me. I'd had a bit of a stint in the city, and then I came down and I started the swimming pool in Lambourne, and then Nicky Henderson bought it because desperate to find a yard, and I was half heading back to the city until Jeremy Tree said that he was wanting an assistant, and that wanted younger people, and I sort of coincided, luckily, very luckily, with Prince Khalid and Juddmonte. Because I think the second or third year I was there, they bought 4 yearlings, and as we know, it's progressed enormously since then. And
was Rainbow Quest one of those when you were there?
Yeah, he was very much there. I mean, I think known fact was the second crop. We had a big grey horse called Marzouk, who Lester Piggott won a 2-mile maiden at York once, and Prince Khalid was there. But that was the first crop, I think, and Alia. There was some. And then we, there were some good horses, and it really lifted the stable, as you'd expect, with a boost like that. And I think at one stage, Jeremy had the pick of the yearlings, and, one year he took 28 yearlings, and they were proper horses. And, we probably only had 60 horses in those days, so it was, blue-blooded stuff. So it wasn't difficult for the fortunes, but timing was really lucky for me, actually.
It was one of those sort of great sliding doors moments, really. I do wonder whether, had it not been for that, you'd have still found your way to doing this, like water finds its course.
Yeah. I mean, I always wanted to be a trainer. I mean, I found a rather badly written letter to my parents when I was 16 saying, could I leave school early, and, do I have to do A-levels and all that sort of thing, and because all I want to be is a trainer. And my father said, well, you can't possibly afford to be a trainer. So I did a sort of stint in Australia. I actually went there's been a program recently called the £10 POM. I actually went to Australia as a £50 POM. I migrated there, and I spent nearly 2 years in Australia until I got slightly spooked by the idea that they were drafting Australians into fight in Vietnam War. And because you give up your passport when you're there, I hadn't become an Australian citizen, obviously, and we were working out in the bush, and you didn't have internet, you didn't have mobile telephones, you don't know what's going on. And I got a bit spooked by the idea of actually going to fight in Vietnam and thinking, do I really want to do that? So I came back before the 2 years up and did a stint in Hong Kong and so on and so forth. But I always wanted to be a trainer, but it was just a question. I never really thought I was going to have the opportunity to do it.
And had that been because you'd always been around horses?
Yeah. I mean, I lived on a farm, and my father had horses, and I got taken out of school one day to ride in a point-to-point age 16, and the headmaster was frightfully grumpy about it. And my father said it's ridiculous. He should see it as a good thing that you're going to ride in a point-to-point. Anyway, the headmaster. So in the end, we didn't tell him. We just snuck off and hoped that one didn't break a collarbone or do something silly. But no, I loved riding, and I guess when one was young, one sort of dreamed of winning the Grand National. That never quite happened.
You did get quite a long way up the riding ladder.
No, not really. Again, I got lucky.
You won a Charlton Festival race.
Yes, I know, but I mean, I think I only had 4 winners or something, and that was one of them.
We haven't got it, I'm afraid.
I know, I'd love to see it. I don't think it exists. It was very heavy ground that year.
It's 69.
69. And a certain John Oaksey was second on Lime Burner for Bob Turnell.
Was it expected to win?
No, not really.
So it's the Kim Muir?
Yeah. Edward Courage, who owned and bred a lot of lovely horses, happened to live 4 miles down the road. And during the school holidays, I used to bicycle down there and ride out. And there were people like David Nicholson and wonderful people, and the Spanish Steps and Royal Relief, and sort of good horses. And I used to be allowed to ride these wonderful horses, and I used to lead them schooling and all that sort of thing. And then along came a horse called Pride of Kentucky, and he wasn't a great jumper. In fact, 1 or 2 of the better jockeys had been unseated. But anyway, that day at Cheltenham, the ground was very heavy, and he jumped from fence to fence. And we had a dream run round. I think I probably looked pretty amateurish, but anyway, the horse won, and I think I did 10 stone 3 probably. And I hadn't eaten, certainly hadn't drunk much, but I hadn't eaten for probably nearly a week. And I remember 2 days before the race, I lived down in Chepstow, worked for Colin Davis, who had Persian War, struggling to get out of bed to do evening stables. So I felt so weak, and I thought, well, I think I've overdone the wasting a bit here, so I had to sort of boost up a bit. But we got there, and then after the race, there must have been a group of Irishmen that backed Pride of Kentucky, and I got sort of hoisted off to a sort of bar where there were lots of neat whiskies and drinks, and I ended up on all fours.
A complete hero.
Complete sort of knockout, and got rescued by a certain Charles Barnett, who was famous for running the Grand National that nearly wasn't.
Absolutely brilliant. And you never rode around Aintree?
I jumped one fence at Aintree. This horse then went to the Topham.
Right.
And I walked the course in the morning. I stayed in a boarding house the night before. I walked the course rather nervously, like I am, in the morning. And these are massive, these fences. And I bumped into Fred Rymel, who was walking the course. And he obviously saw this lanky, ashen-faced youth. And he said, I know what you need. So we went to this bar, and he gave me a glass of champagne. About 10 o'clock in the morning, he said, most jockeys need this before they run in the Grand National. And the effervescence kind of fills you up and get a bit braver. Anyway, we got to the first fence, and I got unseated. So my claim is I'd actually landed on, I did actually jump a fence. That was it.
One fence.
That was it.
It's interesting, you said nervous like I am. If you're a nervous person by temperament, how on earth did you be a racehorse trainer for 45 years?
I don't know, really.
Are you a worrier?
Yeah, terrible. Shocking. I really mind, that's the problem. I think that the risk of failure is so high. And I think it's there. You have great moments, obviously, Time Lock wins and everyone thinks you're marvellous and it's great. But, had Greek Order finish last, and then you get 20 messages saying you should have retired a long time ago, you're underperforming, you're not a good trainer. And it shouldn't wound one, but it actually does. And Harry keeps on saying, take no notice. And why you worry about these things? His temperament is luckily, much better than mine. I've always worried about things. I think it's just kind of the way one is, and I think that, we have to give off an external image of being completely calm. And now that occasionally you go to the races and a camera is trained on you during a race, which I always think is a bit under the belt. You see Nicky Henderson on the same place for the champion hurdle. But, emotions come out, and, in 2 minutes a lot happens. You could make a huge difference to your career that horse has won or hasn't won. And dare I say it, Greek Order very nearly won, and that, would have been great. But I was still thrilled with the way he ran. Had he finished last, there might have been a chance that the horse would have gone to the horses in training cell, and we'd lose out on a potentially nice horse.
So what is it, or who is it, what is it, that has kind of kept you going pretty strongly through that period, with some really notable highs in each of the decades that you've trained?
I think because one's hugely ambitious. I just think I'd be probably useless at everything else, and the only thing I have is to train horses as best I can and put everything into them and do everything I can, think about it all the time as to what will improve this horse. I like being with the animals. I go out at 9 o'clock every night and I feed quite a lot of the horses again at 9 o'clock, and I know what's eaten up, and I go around, as I say, evening stables. I really enjoy doing that, and I think if should you get a horse that for example, we bought a horse recently, a sale from a large trainer in the north that was very well bred and cost 10 grand, and everyone said you shouldn't buy it. If I can get that horse to win a race, and I think we might be able to, that gives me as much pleasure as anything else. It's a real challenge, real challenge to get Al Kazim through a stud career and back on the track. I think about it all day. It's very boring for everyone else, but, that's, I guess, how I am.
When he did come back from stud, how did you get him back onto the racecourse?
Well, he was a remarkable horse, actually. He was a very tough horse, and actually you kind of assume they're going to come back and they'd be all colty and all over the place. And he wasn't. He was very gross and very large, and we eventually got him fit. And, you know, luckily we've got a wonderful sort of mile and 1 furlong gallop, and without that we wouldn't have got him back. I mean, he was a very special horse, and the best day, I think, one of the best days of my racing life was, I said to Mr. Deere, look, this was a 5-year-old, I think, if we aim at the Tats Gold Cup, there's never many runners there. He'd won a Group 2, he'd won the Jockey Club Stakes, and then he broke his pelvis. We might get Group 1 place, and we were thinking he was a wonderful looking horse by Jabawi, that he might make a jumping stallion. And we got there, and the ground was pretty quick, and James Doyle ran the track. And James Doyle had never ridden at the Curragh before, except over 5 furlongs. Luckily, Mr. Deere didn't realise that. And I'd looked at Camelot's races, and, you know, he, bar 3/4 of a length, would have been a Triple Crown winner. He was a spectacularly good horse, and he tracked the pace, and he produced a great turn of foot. And I said to James, whatever you do, you miss the break and you track Camelot. There was only 5 runners, of which 1 was a pacemaker. 1 wasn't much good, I think. And that we did, and to win when you taking on Aidan in his back garden with a horse that was nearly a Triple Crown winner was so satisfying. He asked me before, he sidled up, and you know, it was early days. I think he was the first crop of Jabawi, almost early days, and he said, I always understood that Jabawis needed a cut in the ground, and the ground was sort of good to firm, almost firm in place, trying to sort of unnerve me, I think. But it was...
Interesting psychological warfare, isn't
yeah,
it?
well, I think it is. I mean, he was such a good-looking horse that when he walked into pre-parade ring, the Coolmore boys and Ballydoyle contingent all sort of looked at him and sort of, ooh, wow, this could be a proper horse. And he was a proper horse. I mean, he won 4 Group 1, so had to be.
The other point to note, of course, about your career is, and we've talked about this when you came on the show before, the spectacular start of winning 2 derbies in your first season. Did it become a bit of a millstone in some respects?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, you know, if you're going to tick the boxes, I think the Arc is probably the best race of all myself, and had a couple of runners. But if someone has said you want to tick the boxes and you tick them in the first year by actually getting the monkey off your back and you win an English derby and a French derby in the same year, which I don't think other English trainers actually done. I'm not sure. No doubt your record people will tell you, but I don't think so. You would have grabbed it.
Of course you would.
Whether it did me good, I don't know whether it happened a bit too soon. I felt very sorry for Barry Hills, who'd been trying to win it forever, and he was second in that race. And actually, which is quite often the case, the first 2 were the only horses in that race that genuinely stayed a mile and a half.
Yeah.
The rest were non-stayers.
I've forgotten how easily he won.
He won. He looked good, didn't he?
Yeah. Blue Stag, the runner-up, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, the miraculous thing really was that we had in those days 55, 60 horses, of which 30 were 3-year-olds, of which there were 15 colts. And you end up with Deploy, who was second in the Irish Derby. Sanglemore wins the Dante and the French Derby, and Quest for Fame. And, you know, if you're sitting down playing cards and people would, you know, you got 4 races and then 5 minutes later you got 4 races, it's not possible, because those horses could have easily been in different yards. There wasn't a lot between them. To win the Derby, you need a very special horse that's way better than everything else. And actually all 3 horses were rated 121, 122.
But you wouldn't be human if you didn't think after that, well, I'm probably going to be champion trainer half a dozen times.
I never thought that. I remember talking to all the lads in the yard and saying, listen, this mustn't go to our heads. We've got to work extra hard now. And I think one's feet were pretty firmly on the ground. I mean, yes, you're elated and you're lucky, but I've never well, I hope I've never got carried away by any victory, actually.
How have you enjoyed working with Harry?
Very much, actually. I mean, you know, obviously, Tom, my youngest son, is in Sydney working for John O'Shea. But, you know, they were both always from the start loving racing, loving sport, but, you know, loving racing, and then wanting to know what the new yearlings were like and what's their owner like. So, you know, there was always great enthusiasm there. And they went through, whether it was, you know, tamarisks or, you know, the good horses, and enjoying it, and then school, and Harry did his accountancy and all that sort of thing. And I think I'm extremely lucky, actually, to have a son that wants to do it. You think of so many trainers, I can think of some at the moment, that, you know, are doing so well, but at some stage you're still training when you're 80, or 90, or 100. When do you stop? And it's a bit like running a school. You can't take your eye off the ball. You can't, you know, do it 3 days a week like a lot of people do. I'm 74 next year, and I'm no intention of stopping working. But to have Harry wanting to take on, and have somebody that, you know, I'm absolutely convinced will do very well and has, you know, new ideas, we're lucky, because otherwise I think, you know, the chances are Beckhampton would grind to a bit of a halt, and I think, you know, that would be a sad loss of a bit of history.
You mentioned your other son, Tom, who's down in Oz. I did bump into him in Melbourne last year. He is practically Australian now, isn't he?
It depends who talks to him a bit. I mean, if he's talking to me, he sounds very English, but if you listen to an interview, which he seems to do a few of, he is a proper Aussie. And he loves Australia. I mean, he's getting married next year to a wonderful Australian girl. And, you know, his life will be there. And, you know, he works very hard. But racing's, you know, you know what it's like. It's great there. And he reminded me that we had a horse called Braden Star that won rather too easily at Salisbury one day with David Egan, and needless to say, the telephone starts ringing and offers for Australia, and the horse went to Australia. I can't remember actually what he sold for, but sort of around 200 grand probably. And he sent me a message the other day. He's now won $400,000, and, you know, he's just moving into proper stakes races, and he's going to win a lot more races. And, you know, that is where a lot of good horses obviously go. They're sort of, you know, you see pictures of the races, television. There are so many young people at the races having a wonderful time. And, you know, the idea of going to Ranwick and having a Saturday racing and runners in group races, and then within half an hour you're on a street in a restaurant with all your mates having dinner. You know, Newmarket is a great place, but, you know, you're in your car, 3 hours traffic. You know, if you'd won a Group 1, you're still flogging home in the car. It's not quite the same thing of being to have sort of instant fun, because, you know, racing has to be fun. You know, that's what it's about. It's having fun.
And that's it. When you take racing away from the cities, this is the kind of scenario you're describing. And that gradually over time, that's what Britain has done. Yeah,
I mean, you know, COVID was a shocking killer for so many places, and I don't think a lot of people really got over the sort of not going racing syndrome. I saw a lovely John Garnsey yesterday, and I said, gosh, I haven't seen you for ages. He said, yeah, I haven't been. The last time I was here was before COVID, and you think, well, was that 2 years ago or 3 years ago? You know, you sort of lose time, and it had a terrible dampening effect on racing. I mean, going racing with a mask on, with a cardboard box with a pork pie in it, and segregation, and, you know, it was just pretty rough.
Tony's written a whole book about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, it's damaged the country, you know, and we've suffered. The country suffered a lot. I think, you know, Brexit was bad enough, and then COVID, and, you know, now cost of living is not comfortable.
Do you think racing has been hit harder in terms of horse population and how you sort of see the game on a day-to-day basis? Do you think it's been hit harder by COVID than perhaps we gave it credit for? Or do you think the bounce-back ability has been good?
I think it's a very resilient industry. I mean, you only have to drop into Tats this week to see so many enthusiastic breeders, Irishmen particularly. You know, they've been knocked for 6. Trainers get knocked down. It is a very resilient group of people. But yeah, I guess it probably has. I think I don't know. It seems to me, and I'm, this is not a gripe, right? It seems to me that, Newmarket's got very big, and the stables in Newmarket have 200, 300 horses. And, it's more difficult to get horses in the country, I think. I mean, Rafe's obviously doing fantastically well, but, our numbers have been pretty badly affected, and you can't really, I don't know, COVID or not COVID, but I guess a new owner will come from the Middle East maybe, and they say who are the best trainers, and the obvious names come out, and then the bloodstock agent finds it easier to deal with 4 stables in Newmarket than maybe driving to Wiltshire. I don't know, but we need to get those people down here. We need some of my owner breeders are no more, and we need to fight very hard to actually keep the boxes full.
Perhaps under now the sole stewardship of Harry Charlton, Beckhampton will be full to the brim of beautifully bred horses. That's the hope.
Well, that's the target, and I shall certainly be working extremely hard, and as he will be, to get that message out there. And I think you have to ask for horses. I think you have to hassle. I think you have to demand. Several of my bigger owners came because I asked if I could have a horse. Blue Diamond Stud, for example, was one.
Yeah, and then you train them a Group 1 winner with Decorated Knight, of course. It would be rather nice. I know you don't want this to turn into some sort of funereal effort, but it would be rather nice to go out with a Group 1, wouldn't it, with the name on the licence? Can you pull this off on Champions Day with time left?
Well, it would be great. I mean, I owe so much to Juddmonte, obviously. I mean, Barry Mann and Simon Mockridge do such a fantastic job, and the way those horses are reared and produced, and they're proper horses, stonking horses. And I've been so lucky to really have them around for so long. Yeah, I mean, she won well. I think they went very, very quick. I thought she looked very good in the Galtres last year, and I thought we were a bit unlucky not to win the Galtres. And
You've been by a good horse as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wrote a report in the spring saying, well, we'll go here and then go there and hopefully end up in the Yorkshire Oaks. And then I'm thinking, we're missing the target. We're getting black type, we're running well, but we're not producing what I thought we'd produce. And yeah, Champions Day would be the target. Yeah, she needs to just step forward again, but why not? Why not?
She's a fabulous looking
beast.
She's
a sweet mare, and she's got some Frankels can be a bit sparky. She's so easy. And Amy Vickers, who won one of those great prizes last year, the Godolphin Awards. She not only is head lass and feeds her every day, but she rides her every day, and she loves her, and she's so easy to train, and so straightforward and laid back, and big, strong mare that with a wonderful pedigree. That be great, wouldn't it?
It certainly would. Roger, I know you're going to stay with us for a little while, because I know you'd like to congratulate your former assistant on beating you yesterday.
I have done already.
Dan and Claire are coming back in just a moment.
Watch live racing now on racingtv.com.